Hello. Tonight we're going to be doing some daily roulettes. Very approachable piece of content, something nice to do every week if you like to keep your character up to date. I play on the European servers, so just as a little piece of information, if you are watching and you're thinking, man, if only I could join them. If your character is on light or chaos, you can join, and you're welcome to. You just have to let me know in the stream. And I say, you can join us, because Sip will be joining me. At least for some. And an advantage if you're joining is if you have, a little bit more flexibility in what roles you can play, what jobs you can play. If you can play multiple roles, it's easier for all of us to participate. I can play all roles, and Sip can play most roles, if not all roles. So we can be flexible already, but the more that can, the better. Now, just as a little tip to start the stream with, one thing that I do every single week for a little bit of free money is that I visit the Dominant Enclave and hand them money, and then they'll pay me double for what I would normally get. This is a little reminder in case you used to do it. Remember to do it, the game will not remind you. And then you can just make like an extra 20k. Because you're handing them things worth 20. Whoops. I don't know why I expected the invite to be on the top. Seems like Sip decided to go AFK, maybe? That's fine. I'll give him a few minutes. In the meantime, you will find, if you aren't already in it, that there is a link pinned in the live chat to a Discord server. That is the Discord server associated with the YouTube channel, so that's where you would find other people that watch the channel. What you will also find there is like channels that specifically house the weekly schedule, so that you can more easily find out when I'm streaming, or it shows links to new videos when they come out. So if you're not used to, like, if you prefer to just check your home feed on YouTube, and sometimes you feel like you miss the videos that I put out and you don't want that, then you can join the Discord server. But it is entirely optional, of course. Other than that, I hope everyone got safely into the new year. And then a little bit of a soft warning for anyone that is extra sensitive to game spoilers. As we will be doing duty roulettes, that means that there's not really going to be any like straight up story spoilers. And that's not happening. What is happening is that we might be doing a roulette and we land in some particularly significant encounter in relation to the story that could happen. And the best I can do there is the moment that I see it, I can point out that maybe you don't want to see this, but by that point you've probably already seen the boss. So if you're a little sensitive to that and don't want any of those kinds of spoilers, now you know that it could happen. And Sip has come back. Another thing is, if you would like me to do roulettes as specific jobs, you're welcome to just mention it in the chat. Then I will try my best to accommodate that I'm able to play all jobs. I'm better at some than others, of course, but I'm somewhat capable with every job. And Sip appears to be back. See here, we should be fine with Sip healing. For expert roulette, then I'll be DPS. I have mentioned on stream before that Reaper is one of my favorite jobs to play, but I don't think I've played Reaper very much on stream. I've played a lot more Dragoon, incidentally, through the MSQ streams. I guess it might take a second. Welcome to the stream. I am Become Game End. I hope you're doing well. You say, when will Square Enix let us run roulettes as Disciples of Land and Hand? Fish a tank when? I don't know, but it would be interesting as like dungeons where you, or content where you would have to bring a crafter or gatherer to like get materials or something from the dungeon. But I feel like Final Fantasy XIV is just not structured like that. Based on what I know about Final Fantasy XI, it sounds like it would be much more feasible to do that there. I don't know if they already do it, or if I'm reading a little bit too much into it on a game that I haven't played. But that's how I see it. I think there the dungeons, quote-unquote dungeons, are like open in a way. So that would also lend itself to that. I actually have a friend that the other day he told me that he planned to level Botanist to level 90 first before he wanted to play Reaper, because he wanted to see if there were going to be any references to you already having leveled Botanist, given the fact that lore-wise, I believe Reapers are straight up, if I remember correctly, it's pretty much war botanists out of necessity. So it would sort of make sense, right? Now we need to reapply the Death's Design. And now we're rolling up to one of the most annoying bosses in Endwalker, possibly. Ah, I forgot to prep my Harvest Moon again. Oops. And Game End says that he didn't know about the Reaper thing. I see. I suppose, or the Reaper botanist thing, I suppose it's not something that is like stated very loudly. It's like something that is sort of mentioned in the story, I guess. Maybe on the first quest or something like that. I think that's also where the joke that it's very, very angry botanists that become Reapers or something like that stems from. And hey Luna Fox, welcome to the stream. I hope you're doing well. You also don't like the boss. For me, it's mostly that sometimes it's really difficult to track those tentacles in the ground. We managed to not get hit by the tentacle thing. That is something that even when I'm playing ranged, it is something that takes a lot of focus to get right. And thank you, Luna. I am doing well. The loot portal, as you see. Nope. I thought I got aggro there for a sec. It's a very interesting thing with Reaper is that you can spend, like, you can really make every boss fight interesting with the amount of resources you can carry into the fight without losing too much because of how many cooldowns you have in between fights. It's a little awkward getting damage done when all of the adds are like a good bit away from the portal. That's a little tip. If you tank this dungeon, the best you can do about those portals is try and drag all of the adds onto the portal. There's no tricks to it. If you want the DPS to focus the portal down, the best you can do is put all of the adds on it. Then they will at least certainly cleave it, which is better than them just not attacking it. Moving the entire stack of enemies away from the portal will simply have the effect that the DPS might ignore the portal because it is, you know, better damage to kill the adds. Uh-oh. It seems like it went well. The dot from getting hit by anything on this fight is really brutal. Right. Here there's the circle AoEs on top. I sort of messed up my rotation here. But I messed it up like almost 30 seconds before I ran into the issue itself. Like I had 90 shroud gauge and gluttony was coming up to get ready. The only way I would be able to fix that was if I had done something sooner. Luna says, it's amazing how much control tanks have over things like that and how rarely some of them use those tactics. That's true. That's it's interesting. I made like a long time ago by now. I made a tank starter guide, like what things to worry about when you're just starting out. And I think I spent the first like almost half of the guide on explaining how to pull well, because of how important it is to understand how to pull well. And that sort of boils down to those tactics of how you position the pack so that your party gets the most possible damage and stuff like that. Because I could imagine that a lot of tanks don't use these strategies simply because they don't know or don't realize. Oh, that's a really good one, Luna. The just moving the melee mobs onto the ranged mobs. That is actually a really good example of the kind of control that the tank has. And it really also translates really well into this particular situation in this dungeon, where you have those gates that will just not move anywhere. They might as well be ranged, it's just that they shoot mobs at you. I don't think I can get the full burst off here, but I will try and see how much I can get done. And I messed this up. Excellent. I messed this up. Excellent. Okay, we will not do a second in Shroud. Somehow I messed up the entirety of my opener there. Spin. And Gaiman says, or breaking line of sight to get range to run to you. That is also a really good one. That's one that I love to use in Aurum Vale. Like right on the first big pull. Pull everything into the boss room. But I think the reason why a lot of players are completely unaware of these kinds of tactics is because the majority of pulls in Final Fantasy XIV don't require it. Like, if there are ranged enemies, they're often stacked so that it isn't a problem. Which kind of defeats the purpose. Or you just ignore it and, you know, run back to the ad, or don't pull beyond that ad when you're pulling. Like, the general strategy against them feels like it's usually just don't do it, just ignore it. But those are really good examples. Just generally tricks to force ranged enemies to you. I think it's I think it would be a good idea if I tank the next thing. Now that I'm talking all these tricks on tanking. Oh, I completely forgot to reapply Death's Design again. Oops. Perfectly spaced. Didn't waste a single point of damage. Is there a particular tank you guys would rather see me play? I think we're doing a level 90 roulette next. Did no one else greed on all those items? Oh wait, I just yoinked all of the drops from Sip that also greeded on them. Oops. Luna says Paladin? Well, I think that might actually be... That's sort of fitting, isn't it? This is probably the last opportunity that I'll have proper to stream playing Paladin, the old version, before they rework it, whatever that means. That is a thing that I've talked about previously, that what concerns me about the rework of Paladin right now is that when they brought it up on the live letter recently, they said enough that we know that they're probably not doing they're probably not making it too similar to any of the other tanks, but also not enough that I have any idea what exactly they're going to do. Well, they could very easily turn it into too similar to Warrior if they make Goring Blade give a damage buff, but that's the thing, is that we don't have enough information. Are you ready to go for level 90 Roulette, Sip? And I'm just going to repeat now that I play on Louis Soir, so if you're watching the stream and you would like to participate and you're on an EU data center, that is an option. But it's entirely optional. I just want to bring it up. And Luna says it's weird too because like 3 patches in a row were just straight DPS increases to Paladin. Not just straight DPS increases to Paladin, it was like almost exclusively boosts to the magic burst stuff. Like, oh, now your Holy Spirit does more damage, now your Confiteor does more damage, now your blades do even more damage. Because they were trying so hard, so extremely hard to make Paladin's burst good enough to be able to participate or be able to compete with the other tanks on, you know, the 2-minute bursts and stuff. And I guess they've just thrown in the towel and said, it cannot be done. It is unfixable in this state. Which is sad. Let's see... But it is a really good point, Luna, that they've been giving Paladin buffs all expansion, like buffs and buffs and buffs, and as far as I know, Paladin is still close to the bottom tank in terms of damage output. Despite all that. Despite all of that, they still aren't strong enough. So I think it's fair that they're saying we have to do something else. It's just a shame because there's a lot of Paladin players that love the job because it plays the way that it plays. And understandably, all the Paladin mains, and I don't know, maybe that includes you, Luna, are scared that they're going to wake up on the 10th to have their favorite job deleted. Because that's sort of... There were some summoner players, or previous summoner players, that felt that that's what it felt like when Endwalker released. That their favorite job, old school summoner, was deleted and then just replaced with a completely different job. Or the players that loved the old style of machinist and then they log in to have the ammo system and the heated barrel, or what was it called, removed and things like that. So on and so forth. Like every time a job, like instead of implementing a new job in the game, they take an existing one and completely override it with something else. They are effectively deleting one job and adding a new one that is taking its place. And even if they're similar, it's not the same. I can say that the old machinist played completely differently. The old summoner, surprising no one, played completely differently. And a lot of people will agree that it was a lot harder. And Luna says, all tanks are within 2 or 3% of the DPS of each other, and one of them has to be lowest, right? I don't know if it's such a problem that it needs something so crazy as a rework. Correct. Exactly. Precisely, Luna. That is exactly the weird thing. If you've played any other MMO, there are classes or jobs or specializations, or what do you want to call it, that are completely unviable, like unplayable, because they are so much weaker than the others. One in particular that springs to mind is usually World of Warcraft, where there's usually, you know, the top dogs that are like 5 or 6, maybe 7 or 8 specializations that are so much stronger that they just overshadow everything else, and everyone else just has to take what's left, right? And the reason why it becomes such an overshadowing difference is because the weakest specializations in that game tend to do all the way down to like less than 50% of the damage of the strongest ones. And that sort of comes with the territory of giving a lot of customization options to players in Final Fantasy XIV, because we have no customization of the playstyle of your job. The developers can directly control what you can or cannot do. They have sort of an idea of what the rotation is going to play like and things like that. So they can very strictly control the potential damage of a job, and that means that amongst the tanks, there's like, I think at most usually a 5% DPS difference between them, between all four, like a 5% distance between the best and the worst, which is really good. And between all of the DPS, and we're talking from the top of Samurai to the bottom of Machinist, I think it's Machinist, there's like 10%. But the problem is, and I have a whole video on that subject actually, the problem is that what people see is that one job is worst. One job is the worst one, and another one is the best one. That's how it is. There will always be a worst one. If the damage difference between the best and the worst was 5%, people would argue over it being a problem just as much as they are now. If the damage difference was 1%, you would still see those FF logs, graphs zoomed in to like clarify the relative difference, so you can see that Machinist is doing 1% less than Samurai. And it will always be like that. That's why I'm not particularly concerned. The good news are that the weakest jobs in the game are still capable of clearing the hardest content in the game, so it's not a problem. But I think the reason why they want to rework Paladin is because Paladin feels like it's almost from a different era to maybe to some to the dev team, because it doesn't really fit into this style that they're trying to have all of the jobs fit in with the 2-minute burst and stuff. And Carlos says, what if Paladin dealt all dot at once, like all the dodge damage at once, like Black Mage with procs? Well, Carlos. Also, first of all, welcome to the stream. I hope you're doing well. Second, correct. The only thing we know for sure about the Paladin rework is that all of their dots are gone. Maybe Circle of Scorn still has a dot attached, because they didn't expressly say that that one was removed. But Goring Blade and Blade of Valor has had their dots removed completely. That is the one thing we know with 100% certainty. And that's why I said before that we're not sure. Like, we've gotten too little information to know exactly what's changing, but we've gotten too much information to be able to like make decent predictions on the matter. The scary thing is that the fact that Goring Blade has no dot anymore means that it doesn't do anything in particular, which means that it is very, very open to get, I don't know, maybe Goring Blade gives you 30 seconds of fight or flight when you do it, and then it's basically Storm's Eye, and then Royal Authority is Storm's Path, and then you're too close to what is basically a warrior. And that's exactly what people were afraid of getting, right? Then you become bad warrior. You know, Luna, you have to remember that you would be a warrior, except you were designed to fit in the meta, because you were reworked during the meta. So you would become better warrior. You would become better warrior, but you also have a shield. And you also have holy magic, I guess. Maybe your holy magic means that you can do your quote-unquote fell cleave spam at range. Yeah, that is an interesting suggestion, Carlos, because I suppose the dev team thought something similar and arrived at the conclusion that you did. You know, Luna, it's kind of interesting because the dots being there was actually doesn't actually the dots being there doesn't actually change anything in regards to Paladin's relationship with raid buffs. Do you know what dot snapshotting is? It's perfectly fine if you don't. I'm just going to ask so that I know how much detail I have to add when explaining it. You're familiar with the term. Okay, I'll just give the quick version anyway. So when you apply a dot in Final Fantasy XIV and in some other games actually, the game takes a snapshot of your current state and your target's current state when you do it. Meaning that it checks what buffs do you have, like how much damage increases do you have, how much damage reduction does your target have when it is applied. Which means that if you apply Goring Blade while Fight or Flight is active, then Goring Blade will do 25% more damage. And that is even if Fight or Flight ends during Goring Blade, it will still do 25% more damage for the full duration of the dot. That is dot snapshotting in a nutshell. This goes both ways, by the way. In the current raid tier, the first boss in P5S, this boss has a tank buster that applies a brutal dot to the tank. If you use damage reduction cooldowns on that dot, it becomes manageable. If you don't, then your healers have become your worst enemy for life. They now hate you. So that means that if you are a paladin and you do your burst during raid cooldowns, so that you do, I don't know, stack up all of the raid cooldowns on top of each other, and then you do like 10 or 20% more damage, maybe even more than that, and you finish just as the raid cooldowns end, you apply Blade of Valor, which applies your dot. That means that your Blade of Valor will do, 20% more damage. And if they remove the dot component of Blade of Valor and just make it do that much more damage up front, what it means for Paladin is if the boss becomes invulnerable, it doesn't matter because you already did the full damage. Whereas if there was a dot, then if the boss becomes invulnerable, you just don't get to have that damage. I believe that was the reasoning that they gave for why they're removing the dot component from Goring Blade and Blade of Valor. That the Paladin's damage output is neutered far too heavily by bosses just going, nah, I'm invulnerable, peace, and just leaves. And there's not really much you can do about that. Like, either they have to work all the bosses in the game into, be less trigger happy on the peace out kind of moves that they do like that, which I think is a reasonable move. They don't, you don't need to have every boss become invulnerable for eons. You don't need to do that. And this is a time where it's very convenient to be a paladin. This is the easiest boss move of my life. Yeah, if you're not too familiar with how dot snapshotting works, an excellent place to play around with it is to grab a friend and go to Wolf's Den Pier, the PvP area, and apply a dot to your friend, and then have them use guard, and see that it does the same damage regardless. Or alternatively, apply a dot while their guard is still active, and see that it suddenly only does like 10% of the damage that it would have done, simply because it's dot snapshotting. It's a very, very easy way to play with the mechanic. Normally you would need to have a boss that is impeding your damage output to be able to showcase it. Oh boy. But I think that removing the dot component from the Paladin removes a sort of like signature mechanic of the Paladin. You have to remember that Goring Blade has been a part of the Paladin since Heavensward, as far as I know. I started in Stormblood, so from my perspective, the Paladin has always had a dot they had to manage. That has always been a thing. And they're not going, oh, we're just moving it. No. It's now you have no dot that you need to manage. We're going from having one pretty much 100% of uptime to not having one. Like, the amount of dots that Paladin is losing is comparable to if the dev team one day said that they were going to rework Bard, and the one thing they announced that they are going to change is that Venomous Bite and Storm Bite are no longer going to have a dot component. Rather, they just remove them entirely, because if there's no dot component, then why would you use that over, you know, burst shot? That's how it feels to me. Like, that's what I'm seeing, which is why I'm not sure what they're going to do with all that. Like, are we going to manage something else instead? And the only thing that makes sense to put there in its place is a Goring Blade applies a damage buff. Luna says, do you think adding upfront damage to Goring Blade and Blade of Valor makes sense as a change? I think it's a weird choice. The reasoning they gave being that Paladin's damage is suffering heavily from bosses, you know, becoming invulnerable, causing the Paladin to lose absurd amounts of potential damage output because their target is just no longer able to take damage, means that it's the only, like, surefire way for the Paladin to fix its damage output. Like, if they just did that, there is a reasonable chance that that alone will make Paladin's damage better, if the problem is as big as they say it is. But I don't know what they will do in its place. Like, the first thing I thought when I heard that Goring Blade lost its dot is, okay, so why am I going to use Goring Blade? Because they didn't say what they're doing with Royal Authority, which sort of implies that they're not changing Royal Authority. So I don't know. I think it makes sense to change the dot damage into upfront damage, so that the Paladin isn't just getting nerfed. But I don't know if it's the best solution to the problem. Like for the dev team to explain why they are fixing Paladin by removing its dots, they highlight an issue with raid encounters at the same time. Oh yeah, by the way, here's a little tip. If you can shield the damage from the mine, then you don't get the paralysis or the vuln stack. Dark Knight can do it, Warrior can do it, and Paladin, if they use their invulnerability, can also do it. I don't know if Gunbreaker can do it reliably. Because you need to bury it, you need to take 0 damage from it, otherwise it will not work. But I wonder, like, I am very curious as to what they're going to do with Paladin. And I don't know what, like, if they had asked me what I think that should have been done about Paladin instead, then I don't know what I would have said. The problem with Paladin is that, and I'm mostly, like, I'm sort of like filling in the blanks for myself, but it appears that Paladin has worked almost the same since A Realm Reborn. The main change that they added is that at some point they gave Paladin like a damaging AoE attack where they used to just use flash to blind enemies. Which generated a lot of like fixed enmity, but that's like from a again, this is completely from a different universe of the game, pretty much. Because Paladin has survived somewhat unchanged throughout the years since A Realm Reborn, it means that all of the other jobs that have been changed drastically, they have been changed around the Paladin that has just been, you know, a solid statue amongst all of this modernization. And Warrior fits the mold because Warrior already had this, like, they were moving more and more and more and more towards this use Berserk lol strategy, which just so happens to work really well with 2-minute bursts. Dark Knight wasn't really, like, Dark Knight has been changed a lot, but if I think about how Dark Knight worked, like, in Stormblood, the way I see it, it could still work. Like, it would still fit today's meta, so to speak. But Paladin has always been a tank whose entire, like, theme, the entire style of it is that it's like relentless and just keeps going with reliable damage. And then they've just added this requiescent burst, and that sort of like just added a little seed of something. And then they've kept building on this burst because, wouldn't you know, a DPS or a tank whose DPS is entirely based on I do more damage than everyone else over a long duration, and everyone else being the other tanks mainly. But that's the Paladin's idea, is I do more damage than everyone else or my competition over time because my consistent damage is higher. Everyone else will compete by doing bigger bursts, but my damage is good for the entire fight. Incidentally, this is not very helpful when raid buffs can only buff you for a short amount of time. So the only way to make Paladin good in such a universe is to buff Paladin's consistent damage. Like, make it so that Paladin, like, instead of trying to make Paladin fit into this mold, maybe they shouldn't have buffed the magic burst so much. Maybe they should have buffed all the physical damage. and seen, what if we just increase like the DPS floor of the Paladin until it's high enough that it doesn't matter, that it plays really poorly with raid buffs. What if we did that? That would actually also make Paladin a really good tank for players that haven't really learned this whole like 2-minute burst thing yet. Because Paladin would just be like, I mean, I can use a burst, but my burst is kinda lackluster. I thrive more on just doing good damage. I think that might have been an interesting solution. I think, honestly, now that I think about it, I think that's what I would do about it. Would be like, let's try and see what happens if we dial those magic burst buffs back again, and then sprinkle some buffs on the physical side instead. What would happen? Would Paladin be better for it? Would Paladin be better in a different way? Would Paladins excel in certain fights where the other tanks don't? That's also part of the problem with having if you're trying to keep a very close balance of all jobs in every role, then you need to make it so that there is no job that can do something so exceedingly well that it makes the other tanks unviable. Like, if there was a fight that, for some reason, required a really high sustained damage, then Paladin being better at doing that might make a tank that doesn't do that very well, Warrior, incidentally, would have a really hard time, and I'm specifically highlighting Warrior because that's something I noticed. That, like, if I do Stone Sea Sky, you fight a striking dummy, and when you've done your last inner release and there's like 30 seconds left of the exercise, you just see, oh, but the striking dummy still has so much health left and I don't have any more burst. So you're just sitting there sandbagging it because you don't have anything left. But if you're playing Paladin, you just keep going because there's coming more. You still have more. You always can do something. Your damage floor is a lot higher. Meanwhile, the warrior's damage peak is way higher in comparison. And Luna says, I agree with buffing Paladin's physical damage. It was behind the magic burst before the buffs, so it definitely feels very lopsided. Yeah, exactly. I'm guessing that they intended the magic burst to be like the way that Paladin keeps up with the 2-minute burst, which then had the knock-on effect of making fast Paladin have one of the jankiest openers in the world, where you cast Fight or Flight 18 seconds before you pull. Hey Zip, should we do 50, 60, 70, 80 next? Oh, and he's playing Warrior for leveling, so of course he has to be the tank. But I think that would be the better solution. Like there's a lot of oh, hell's lit. There's a lot of concerns, you could say, with what you could or couldn't do. I think it's weird that they're trying to rework Paladin to what sounds like trying to fit the mold of making all the jobs fit into the 2-minute burst, but honestly, I don't think Paladin is the only job that quote-unquote would need that. I'm pretty sure now players have adapted to this problem, but I'm pretty sure that Black Mage is also a job that thrives on just having an incredibly high sustained DPS. And then the way that Black Mages have adapted to the 2-minute burst is just found ways to concentrate their damage a bit more into burst windows. But honestly, it's not like Paladin isn't doing exactly the same thing. Paladin is literally lining their magic burst up so that it just so happens to land in the raid cooldowns, even though the the best rotation you can make doesn't really jive with that very well. Who knows? Maybe Black Mage will get a rework at some point. What do you think, Yoshi P? Should we rework your main? But I would say that you can kind of feel how Black Mage also has this like weird jankiness from being an extremely old job that has hardly been changed. Looks like Sip stunned it, I guess. Yeah, Black Mage, you can also feel like the remnants of being an A Realm Reborn job in some places. Like, for instance, how out of place Blizzard 1 feels for the vast majority of your leveling experience. And it also feels a little strange. Like, if you think about it, it feels a little strange how... How Fire 1 fits into the rotation, and technically the way that this is resolved at level 90 is just by going, oh, you just get a better Fire 1. Yeah, so maybe there could be an argument for Black Mage needing a rework too. Hey Robert, how are you doing? And welcome back. I hope you had a great holiday and a great, great New Year, I suppose. Oh, well, Robert, I guess you came in at just the worst time for that. We were talking about how Paladin is getting a rework next week. Exactly on Tuesday. And one of the good arguments... one of the good arguments for why Paladin gets a rework is that if you check out how Paladin worked since A Realm Reborn, Paladin is possibly one of the most unchanged, somehow one of the jobs with the least changes since A Realm Reborn, all things considered. Which means that part of the reason why Paladin would benefit from a rework is that it needs to be like modernized to fit in with all the other jobs, where most of them have been adjusted to the meta, right? Even Warrior, who honestly are also on the list that haven't received that many changes. The reason why Warrior can get away with it is because Warrior was sort of designed with this whole like, oh, I'm just going to do a big burst every minute. That was almost sort of how it played since the very beginning. It's just that it was every 90 seconds that it did a big burst at the beginning. But Paladin has hardly received anything. So the argument is, the argument that I'm making is, well, the reason why Paladin doesn't fit in very well is because Paladin was designed as like a sustained damage dealer tank. Like, rather than doing a huge amount of damage in a short time span, it just does more damage over time, which like fit extremely well when they only had 2 tanks. You had the warrior, which did a huge burst every now and then you had Paladin that just did more damage all the time and then didn't have as much of a burst. And then we go over to the argument, and this is how I came to the, I think maybe Black Mage also needs a rework, is that Paladin needs, quote-unquote, needs a rework because Paladin is a sustained DPS in a world governed by burst DPS. Black Mage is also sustained DPS. Like, it works by being a sustained DPS. That's what it does. The only reason why Black Mage sort of still works well is because all the Black Mage players have just found ways to concentrate their great sustained damage in burst windows, so that it sort of worked out. That's sort of the simple explanation of how it worked out. Why it worked out is because they've just found ways to concentrate their damage, and Paladin sort of has too, by stacking their like by ensuring that their magic burst lands in the raid cooldowns. But you could argue that Black Mage also needs some help, and one of the ways that you can also see how ancient the Black Mage is how it has some weird jank with some of its toolkit. Like, why is Blizzard 1 the way that it is? That you just kind of, it's just kind of there from level 35 until like level 90. The only thing that you use Blizzard 1 for is occasionally as a filler, but you could absolutely use Blizzard 4 instead. So that means that Blizzard loses all of its, like Blizzard 1 has no purpose after level 58. None. And then it just gets a new purpose at level 90 because it turns into Paradox. And Fire 1 has a similar situation where it's just kind of there at some point. And Robert said it was nice to see, it was good to see family. I'm glad to hear that. That is good. And Santo, welcome to the stream. I hope you're doing well. He said, you said I'm just hoping they don't rework Gunbreaker as well and turn it into copy-paste Warrior Dark Knight in the future. That would be weird if they did that, wouldn't it? Considering that didn't Dark Knight receive its change that made it feel so much like Warrior? Didn't that happen in Shadowbringers when they added Gunbreaker? It would be really strange if they then went back and said, actually, we want Gunbreaker to be even more like a warrior. I don't hope that either. I also hope that they won't make Paladin that. I also hope they don't make it into like an alternative Gunbreaker. I would like my tanks to be as different as possible. That would be the nicest solution, wouldn't it? You can also see another thing where there has happened some modernization, like with the healers. Astrologian had a massive advantage as a healer because its cast time on its basic attack was only 1.5 seconds. Like, now the intent was that because your GCD is only your casts are only 1.5 seconds, you always had the opportunity to weave a card or something. Now the problem is that OGSD slot also enables you to weave a heal. Now the thing is, Scholar could weave something in between, you know, Ruin 2 casts, but that was still a DPS loss. Astrologian could weave heals at no loss. And White Mage was even worse. Like, if you wanted to cast any healing whatsoever without, like, it being a DPS loss, as a white mage, it had to be when you were reapplying your dot. And technically, that also applied to Scholar. Now, you may be thinking, that's kind of strange. Don't all healers have a 1.5 cast time on their basic attack? Correct. It didn't used to be like that. They changed it because of how much of an advantage Astrologian had, I'm pretty sure. So that's also a sort of like modernization or normalization, you could say, because in Shadowbringers, Astrologian was the one that could weave one thing after every GCD. White Mage was the one that couldn't, and the Scholar was the one that could at a cost. Like, it's such a small thing, but it made every healer very different, in a way. And Santos says they're removing dots from even more stuff. Just wondering if Bioshock will ever get removed. Not a huge fan of it, but I like Sonic Break. That's a good question. But yeah, that is something that is concerning me too, is that if they're removing the dots from Paladin because it causes problems with, in particular, with raid encounters where the boss leaves and becomes untargetable and stuff like that, well, that argument works for all jobs with a dot. So you're saying that Paladin loses its dots because it's a DPS loss when the boss becomes invulnerable? Okay, Gunbreaker's Sonic Break, Gunbreaker's Bioshock, Dark Knight Salted Earth, Paladin's Circle of Scorn. All healers. Just all healers. Slipstream on Summoner. Black Mage's Thunder. Bard with its 2 dots. You could almost argue that the Machinist's Wildfire is a dot, it's just that it takes only 1 time. Samurai's Higanbana. Sword of Ninja's Daughter. Monk's Demolish. Dragoon's Chaos Spring. Why is it that it's not an issue for them, but it is an issue for Paladin? Right? Like, this was something that I was briefly mentioning earlier, that suggesting that Paladin having dots is a disadvantage for Paladin because of a lot of recent boss encounters having the boss become invulnerable for a while, says more about the boss encounters than Paladin. And what I mean by that is, the boss becoming untargetable doesn't need to mean that the boss becomes invulnerable. Last week I was doing a battle on the Big Bridge in connection with Mogtome farming. Gilgamesh in this encounter, so you run up to him and then you attack him, and then when his health drops to like around 50%, he becomes untargetable. And that's the key word here, he becomes untargetable. Not invulnerable, untargetable, which means that if you apply dots to him before he becomes untargetable, when he becomes targetable again, he has less health than when he was untargetable, because the dots were still ticking. Why can Goring Blade not do that on a modern boss, right? I'm guessing that the reason is because they don't want people cheesing a boss by doing something like that. I don't know how they would do that with a modern boss, like a recent boss, with the amount of health it would have. But I suppose there is a probability that if bosses could be cheesed by just stacking dots on them before an intermission, then people would find a way to do it. and that could cause problems for jobs that don't have dots. But yeah, I think that is an interesting perspective, Santo, that if they're removing dots from stuff, who's to say, like, who's next? Who's next on the chopping block? What is getting its dots removed next? Also, just for the sake of discussion here, Sonic Break does 900 potency of damage if you removed the dot and just made it do the entire thing up front. 900, which would make Blasting Zone kinda weird. Like, you do a huge explosion, 720 potency. Sonic Break, you stab the opponent, and it does 900. So that would be an awkward situation. And Potato Rice says, and welcome to the stream, Potato Rice. I hope you're doing well. As someone who recently got to Endgame, I'm curious, what are you looking forward to or working towards at the moment? I'm guessing when you say quote-unquote Endgame, I'm guessing that you mean you have completed the main story and you're sort of looking around on what to work on. I like to just, I log in, do my dailies, do weekly stuff, generally like normal difficulty content, because I don't really want to invest the time in having a savage raid team and stuff like that. So I just do the new stuff. So that means that when the patch is coming on Tuesday, the thing that I'm looking forward to the most is figuring out how new Paladin works. And right now I'm not working towards anything in particular. I'm sort of waiting for what content is coming. The great thing about Final Fantasy XIV, and I'm just going to list this because if you're new to being in the end game of Final Fantasy XIV, Potato Rice, you don't have to grind anything. You only have to grind the things that you want to grind. When the new raid tier comes, and I'm guessing that it's coming around May? I'm pretty sure it's coming like in May, because it's going to be 4 months from now? 8? Yes, 4 months from now. When that comes, there will be new crafted gear that will basically overshadow the existing gear. So the only advantage you get from working really hard to get the best gear from the current raid tier is that you have slightly better gear on day 1 of a patch. And shortly after, the crafted gear will become more easily accessible. So the reason for you to do Savage content should be that you enjoy playing Savage content. The reason that you do an extreme fight should be that you enjoy the extreme fight, like that particular fight is enjoyable. The reason that you do an ultimate is because you enjoy the challenge. It should not be, I want the gear it's dropping, because that gear will become obsolete surprisingly quickly, all things considered. Like, if you get a piece of equipment from the newest raid tier on day 1, that gear will be the best gear in the game for 8 months. And then new gear will replace it. And that's something you just have to get acquainted with. So that is partly why I don't do much Savage Raid content, because one of the things that I enjoy the most in Final Fantasy XIV is to play around with the job and practice how to play the job. Like mastering an opener, learning how to play a job like a little bit freestyle, learning what to do when, in a general sense. I find it very satisfying to do dungeons, normal difficulty content, as best as I can. Some players will say, but why would you bother? It's really easy content. You'll beat it even if you're not trying. That might be, but there is something satisfying about being able to beat it extra well. And if you're a Savage Raider that like to do passes, that's basically the same thing. It's just that instead of me measuring my performance in doing a bigger damage number than someone else, I'm measuring my performance in how consistently I beat the dungeon, how well I did the mechanics of the dungeon, with random players of random skill levels. And Potato Rice says, I did P5S and I want to finish P6S, mostly just to say I beat it. I don't really want to grind for higher item levels at this point, although I do really like the clams from this tier. Now see, that is also a good argument. I just think I have met some players that wanted to Savage Raid, not because they enjoyed the encounter, but because they wanted the new glam. My observation was that they did not enjoy it. So that is to say, if you like Savage Raiding, Potato Rice, and it sounds like you do it. Go for it. But just don't do it because you feel like you have to. If you're a player that comes from a different MMO, then you might feel like you have to, because in most MMOs, as far as I know, especially World of Warcraft, the end game is raiding. In Final Fantasy XIV, the end game is whatever you want it to be. The end game can be money making to buy a large house, when there is one available on auction. On Tuesday, your objective could be to get the coolest glams, in which case maybe you will have to Savage Raid, or you'll make do until the encounters become easier. Maybe you like mount farming, then you might also have to Savage Raid, but again, you can wait until later. And you can, there's a lot of options for what you want to do. You don't have to raid. Anyway, welcome to this duty roulette stream where I just stand in Limsa Lomensa and talk for a while, right? And Sip, are you ready for leveling? And Potato Rice says, it's been fun and I really enjoyed the challenge, but not something I'd want to do every week. My main goals otherwise are just to get cool glams. That's good. When I originally got to to max level, or well, to endgame, the thing that I spent a lot of time on was that my endgame experience was for the most part just leveling all jobs to max level. Just leveling every single job to max level was my objective. And it was so much my objective that I was in. When I started playing, I joined the first free company that bothered to ask if I wanted to join their free company before inviting me. I stayed in that free company and didn't bother to look for a different one, even though the free company was sort of dead, until I had leveled up every job to max level. Which meant that I didn't really participate in any other content than leveling jobs in some capacity, because I really enjoy doing that aspect of the game. But just speaking from experience, you might want to try and find friends to play the game with when you reach max level or reach the end game. That might make the game more fun. And Santos says, I'm looking forward to the new ultimate. Never done one, but I love savage raiding. Uh-oh. Ow. I haven't done an ultimate either. It is interesting, it's just the idea of doing a 20-minute long encounter-ish is not something that I would like to do for weeks. I feel like the best way to approach doing an ultimate is to try and find a static. It's going to feel impossible to deal with if you're not going with the same players every week. And I don't really want to join a static myself, which would already cause problems for me if I want to savage raid. For the sake of like in World of Warcraft, I used to raid the I used to raid pretty much every single week in World of Warcraft for years, because when I was playing, I usually played with one of my best friends who loved to raid. So he would come back to the game and he would almost immediately find a raid team, and then he would have me join. I would not raid if he wasn't also raiding, is what I'm trying to say. I sort of completely quit raiding when he stopped playing as much, and that's partly why I'm not savage raiding in Final Fantasy XIV. The only savage raid team I've been in Final Fantasy XIV is when a friend in the game asked if I wanted to join their savage raid team, and when they quit, well, when that raid team split up, I quit savage raiding again. The only other savage raiding I've done since then has been at the start of this raid tier. I did some party finder stuff on stream to show how it looks, how it goes. And I didn't find that it was super great as a for streaming. Like, I think a lot of the value in watching a savage raid stream comes from the fun of the banter of the raid team. So if you're not in a raid team, it's going to feel a lot more quiet and focused. And Luna says, Ultimate seems like you only have to be perfect for 20 minutes challenge. Yeah, you could say that. That is an interesting way to put it. And it is not too far off of something that I've talked about in regards to like playing perfectly in Final Fantasy XIV before. I'll get back to that. That is, I think, an interesting conversation to have. And Potato Rice says, I've been watching the stream while at work and just wanted to say... Oh, now I need to make sure that Zip doesn't die. Nope, Zip got himself with raw intuition. Been watching the stream while at work and just wanted to say I like the streams and videos, by the way. Thank you so much, Potato Rice. I really appreciate it. And Carlos says, say I have all my jobs level 70 and I've heard that subsequent expansions have made the jobs easier to play. And I came to the conclusion that maybe leveling all jobs to 70, I can get a good idea of what they do. Am I right about that? Yes, I think some jobs it might be more difficult than others to gauge how the job plays, because like some jobs get a very drastic change at a specific level. But I think that you don't need to level all jobs to 70 to have an idea of how they play necessarily. Here's the thing. If you play a job to level 50 and you're not enjoying what you're having, like the basic rotation of the job is not fun, for the majority of jobs, that's not going to change by level 70. Like, the only difference is that they're going to build on that. And I'm saying for the vast majority because Black Mage plays completely different at level 60 than at level 50. But Black Mage plays much the same at level 70 and 60. So it's a little complicated, but I think 70 might be a good level if... oh, there's someone doing the big circle strat. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. I talked about this on last stream when we did Bottom's Metal as part of the main quest. There's two ways to do that particular running, like, chase AoE mechanic. Either you stay and eat your own pizza slice, and that works for everyone, or you do the big, the run in a circle strat. And if you do the run in a circle strat, and not everyone is doing the run in a circle strat, then things are going to get awkward very quickly. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like level 50 is a decent time to say, like, if you don't like the base rotation that you have at that very moment, like, if you're not enjoying what you have of a job at level 50, then you have to keep in mind that there's a pretty good chance that the job is only going to build on that. Sip, remember, you can tell which star shard is going to die early by the blue line AoEs that came just preceding it. But like, if you're level 50 with a job and you don't like how it works, in general, like, you don't like the rotation, then you're probably not going to enjoy it at level 70 or 80 or 90 either. If there's a specific aspect of the job that you don't enjoy, then there is a chance that it's going to get fixed later, or it's going to be built upon later. But if you don't like the job as it is, then that's never going to change. And Luna says, Dragoon is another one that takes forever to feel different than Lancer. It's like level 70 before you even get your job gauge. That's true. And even back when you got your job gauge at level 54, Sip, you want to move out of the way. There's going to come a boulder out of that door in a moment. That is a good point, Luna. But I think exactly because they get their gauge at level 70, that also means that it's a pretty decent point to say, okay, am I enjoying this now? At level 70. The reason why I'm saying that maybe level 70 isn't, like, you don't need to be level 70 to know whether you want to play a job or not, is because I feel like if you're playing the game to have fun, and hopefully we all are, right? If you're playing a job just to figure out whether you like it or not, and you're playing it to level 70, that's at least 10 plus hours, I think. If you're playing in an enjoyable way and not, you know, power leveling or something. And that would be 10 plus hours of a job that you might not be enjoying, and you're playing it all the way to 70 because Kaitsu Chaiji on the internet said so. I think that level 50 is a good point to like check, like to like take a check with yourself and say, do I enjoy this? Do I want to keep going? Level 70 is a great spot to say, like to like be even more specific on whether you like it or not. But I think level 50 is a good like point to say whether you like it. A lot of jobs get their basic mechanics in order by level 50. Some jobs take a little bit longer than that, but they tend to have the basics filled out by 50. Like, if you think about it, Wild Dragoon doesn't even get its gauge before level 70. Even though the Dragoon doesn't get its gauge, even though Dragoon doesn't get its gauge until level 70, at level 50 you have your 1, 2, 3 combos. By level 60 you have 1, 2, 3, 4 combos. And by level 70 you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 combos. And the way that Dragoon works, and that is still the case at level 50, is that you're just doing the same 1, 2, 3 combos in a specific order and specific quantities, while filling in with OGCD attacks, like your jumps and stuff. By level 70, the only real difference that you'll feel by then is that you have some particularly higher value ones that you're going to be using slightly differently. But for the most part, you're still just doing your basic combos while, well, your specific 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 combos while sprinkling in OGCD stuff. So that's kind of why I'm saying that a job probably is set close enough in stone by level 50. Because the basics of the job is sort of put together by then. And then Santos says, and then there's Monk. It's basically the same at level 60 and 90. Yeah, that's true. What do they get between level 60 and 90? Like, at level 60 they get Masterful Blitz. And then they get some damage cooldowns, right? And other than that, just some buttons become better. Is that it? They also get Six-Sided Star, but... you know... Six-Sided Star is one of the best examples of what was it? I remember a long time ago, and that might have even been leading up to Shadowbringers long ago. Monks saying, I don't know what they would give us. Like, the job feels pretty fine. Like, we're not missing anything. We have everything we want. At level 70, the job is complete. You don't need to add anymore. What do they get at level 80? Here's an attack specifically designed to finish your combos. Like, when the boss tells you to get lost, you use that. When you have an attack specifically for that, we can probably agree that you have everything. And Potato Rice says, Scholar doesn't change a ton, but it does get enhanced Sacred Soil. Ah, yes. Ah, yes. And then there's Sage that is like... Oh, Sacred Soil. Imagine if I had that, but it's just like a buff that I apply to people. Like, I'm not entirely I'm not making this up when I'm saying that. In Shadowbringers, I'm usually played Scholar in dungeons because I loved the like automatic healing and being able to just put down Sacred Soil. And the only thing that I was annoyed about with Sacred Soil was if only people didn't step out of it. If only it was bigger. If only I could just attach it to people. And then Sage comes along this. You called? Because Caracol does exactly that. Like, exactly that. It's like... Scholar has Sacred Soil and Sage has better Sacred Soil. Even though it's such a small thing. And Luna says, it's a good place to be, honestly. A job being complete, so to speak. Yeah, let's actually take a look at that. What does Monk get from level 60 to 90? Normalize it. Indeed. Hey Skullwolf, how are you doing? Ding ding dong. Let's see, from level 60 to 90, you get a defensive cooldown, a damage cooldown, a raid buff, a damage cooldown, a buff to an existing attack, a useless button, a combo finisher, an upgrade to an existing attack, and... oh yeah, there's also these. Better procs, faster GCDs, more utility, more damage to your existing buttons, a better attack, a buff to your raid buff, a better attack. Like, from level 60 to 90, the only thing that the monk actually adds to its arsenal is a defensive cooldown, 3 damage cooldowns, 6-sided star, and bruh, the ability. Like, if there's anyone that plays Monk enough to be able to tell me that that Anatman has a significant use in some capacity, do let me know. But I'm pretty sure that my assessment in my Monk guide that I released a while back, that Anatman's functionality is that it requires a huge amount of effort and it hardly gives you anything back. Like, hardly anything. Like, it saves you potentially... In most cases, you're going to be using Form Shift after downtime and just use Dragon Kick Twin Snakes. So what you're getting out of doing Anatman perfectly is 15% damage on Dragon Kick and Twin Snakes. How much does that add up to? 48 for the Dragon Kick and... 42 for the Twin Snakes. So you're getting 90 potency out of using Anatman perfectly. 90 potency. Imagine if you had an attack that said if you stand still for 30 seconds, you will do 90 potency damage to the boss. Anyway, Skullwolf says doing good, just doing some stuff in another Discord. That's okay. And Carlos says, also perfect balance and form shift feel like the same thing, right? At least in my sprout eyes. So form shift and perfect balance are two slightly different things. The key thing is that perfect balance in a vacuum is surprisingly similar to form shift. Similar, but this is not a vacuum. There is a button that interacts with perfect balance. There's not a button that interacts with form shift. So form shift... I think the easiest way to explain it is to go to a striking dummy. So let me just go to my house. So form shift means that normally if you're below level 52, you will start the fight by, going, oh, I need to do Dragon Kick, no effect, and then Twin Snakes, and then Demolish, and then Dragon Kick gives me Latin Fist. And then you can do boot shine, right? So you're not getting the value out of Dragon Kick at the start. When you have Form Shift, you just click Form Shift, that takes a GCD of its own. So that means you shouldn't use it during combat if you could attack something. But it does mean that you can open with Dragon Kick and gives you Leaden Fist immediately. It feels like it doesn't change much, but it makes the opener feel a lot more fluid. It feels a lot better. Perfect Balance interacts with this gauge here. If you're low level, you don't have the gauge. I believe the gauge appears at level 60 when you get Masterful Blitz, and that's why I said they seem similar in a vacuum. The way that Perfect Balance works is that it effectively gives you Form Shift 3 times in a row, and Perfect Balance being an ability means that you can weave it between your weapon skills, which means that you could do Dragon Kick, Perfect Balance, Twin Snakes if you wanted to. And you can see here, when I'm doing the GCDs, it fills out these runes, and now Masterful Blitz turns into Rising Phoenix, and when I use that, I get this thing. And then I got Formless Fist, Form Shift, from spending Rising Phoenix. And then I can do Perfect Balance again. And then now I just choose to do like step 1 combos a little bit. You see 3 of the same rune, and now it turns into a different attack. I spent that and I get a different gem thing over here. And again, that doesn't really mean much. But then we use Perfect Balance one more time and go through these again. And now turned into a third attack that does 1150 potency. It hits like a truck. Oh yeah, 47,000 damage. That's something you see every day, right? So is Perfect Balance and Form Shift sort of the same? Form Shift is something you use to start a fight. Like, it makes you able to make your opener more fluid, It makes it nicer. Perfect Balance is like a damage cooldown. When you're low level, if you're level 58 or below, then Perfect Balance basically just means that you can do 3 of your strongest GCDs in a row, which in most situations is going to mean you're going to do Dragon Kick, Moonshine, Dragon Kick. And because you don't have Masterful Blitz, using Perfect Balance puts you in a situation of having no form. So you kind of want to use 2 Perfect Balances in a row to compensate for that. That makes it very, very awkward. But when you hit level 60, Masterful Blitz makes it make sense, Carlos. I hope that makes sense. And Mackerel, which is sipping jackets in game, says, "Oh, you could invade the neighbor of our free company house and use their striking dummy. That's what I do to practice rotations." Well, I could do that, but I'm pretty sure that the teleport fee to my house is cheaper than the teleport fee to our free company house. Also, Sip, are you ready for trials? But I guess that's a really good... I think Monk might be a good example of a job where... whether you like the job or not at level 50... On the one hand, Monk is so rotation focused, like the base rotation of the GCDs, that at level 50 you sort of already have all that. But because of how much it changes at level 60 with Masterful Blitz, it might be better to make that decision at level 60. Let's go Samurai. Ah, yes. Hydra. If anyone is seeing this boss and going, what is that? I've never seen this in my life. This boss is this trial and boss is unlocked by doing the first few steps of the A Realm Reborn Relic Weapon questline. For some reason. The only reason that I have it unlocked is because it is mandatory to do this to unlock the mentor roulette. Oh. Oh, right. Fear itself. This is this is not looking good. Oh dear. The big problem is that it used fear itself while standing on an AoE. You're supposed to stand under the boss for that, I believe. And nearly no one were. Because it wasn't safe to do so. What a simple fight, and yet so difficult. Oh look guys, it's the unicorn, adventurer in need, DPS. Alliance raid, so any bets on whether we get a level 50 alliance raid or maybe we get a 60 or 70 one? Let's go Black Mage. And Luna says, Circus Towers incoming. I wouldn't be surprised if we get Circus Tower. So here's a fun little thing to talk about, is that one of the benefits of choosing to play the Savage raid of a particular raid tier is that normally when you reach max level, your gear options will be, well, you can buy the crafted set, which will be, you know, the minimum item level, and then you can do the normal raid for an alternative armor set. So that's your 2 gear options pretty much. If you want item level 620 gear, at the start of a raid tier, if you're not Savage raiding, the only option is the weekly tombstones. When the Alliance raid comes out, you will then also be able to use both the crafted set again, because you'll be able to upgrade those. So that's 2 options. And then for your armor pieces, you will be able to use the Alliance pieces as well. So that does mean that you suddenly have 3 options for certain gear pieces, certain gear slots, which gives you more customization options. And if you're Savage raiding, you will already at the start of a raid tier eventually be able to get 2 options of 630 gear by upgrading the weekly tombstone stuff and the actual Savage raid gear drops. In most cases, just having 2 options gives you the opportunity to optimize any job you want. But in the first... Oh, we got a level 60 Alliance raid, Sip. You talked too much about not having completed it, so now the game said, now you're getting it. But what I meant to say about that is that in the first raid, in the first 4 months of a raid tier, so before the Alliance raid is out, if you're not a Savage raider, but you want to upgrade your equipment, you know, get to item, get to the weekly tombstone item level of gear, which is slightly better than the crafted gear, then you have 1 option. Only 1. Which, isn't that interesting? For most jobs, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter because you can just use whatever's there. But some jobs care a little bit about what stats are on the gear. For example, the for example, Black Mage cares about having a lot of spell speed on their gear. Reaper cares about not having a lot of skill speed on their gear. A lot of melee jobs actually care a lot about not having too much skill speed on their gear. But if you only have 1 option for gear, you don't really get to decide that. You just say, do you want gear or not? Which has led to the simple fact that while I do have a few 620 mage pieces, my black mage is wearing full 610 because that is in fact a way to have spell speed on every single slot, which I value far higher than having the highest possible item level, especially when we're getting scaled down anyway. Nuna says, how much of that stat loss can be made up for with materia? So the simple answer is that even if you have all the materia in the world, 10 item levels are almost always better than the correct or best stats. So choosing to have the worse gear to have the better stats is mostly like a being picky kind of thing. That's why I'm lucky that I can play Black Mage in content where I'm scaled down, where it doesn't matter. The reason why I'm saying that you can't make up for it is because Just a moment. Is because the gear with higher item level on it will have more strength, or intelligence, or mind, which makes the base number on your attacks bigger. And you can't get materia to compensate for that. That is not an option. So choosing higher item level will always be the superior choice. Because of that. Uh-oh, I hope that's not an AoE. So, I think the best way to say it is that what I wanted to say with that is more that if you really, really, really care about having the optimal stats for your job on your gear, then there is a huge advantage in playing Savage Raids. However, if you're not playing Savage Raids, or generally really, really the hardest content in the game, then you never needed the perfect stats anyway. Like then it's just, I want to have really nice stats on my gear. So you don't have to worry about it. That's I think is the important part, is you don't have to worry about not having the best stats on your gear. But if you place one of the jobs that are a little bit picky about it, such as Old Paladin, we can just call it Old Paladin, in case anyone decides to watch this this stream in the future. Paladin gets changed next week, remember? So it's Old Paladin now. Old Paladin has like 2 different rotations, depending on whether you have a really slow GCD or a faster one. Oh boy. Can we kill her through the shield? Please say we can. Oh yeah, there's also another thing. When you get scaled down in content, just speaking of Luna asking about materia, when your gear gets scaled down, so there's this icon with like the soft-edged square things here, and like that squiggly thing in the middle. That means not only that your stats are scaled down on the piece, but also that all of your materia don't do anything. This is why sometimes the best gear for an ultimate, an old ultimate namely, will recommend old gear. Because if you match your gear to the encounter so that you are not using gear that outscales the encounter, then you can use materia. Now, the difference here is that while your gear's actual stats will get scaled down, the way that works is that the item level on the piece is going to get downscaled, which means that the stat budget on the item is going to get reduced. If you've ever opened like the materia melding menu, you see like those stat values of how much of each stat can be in the piece of equipment. That is the real number that gets reduced when your gear gets scaled down. And then the stats on the gear are always the same. Those are unchanged. So that means that, for instance, if I were to go into downscale content like this, this ring will have as much vitality and intelligence as it can have in this raid. It will also have as much crit and spell speed as it can, simply because it's getting scaled down to like level 200 something. So, because there's at least 91 spell speed on it, the probability that these stat limitations on the piece by default is, when scaled down, is more, the probability that it is less than how much is already on it is very good. A very, very good chance. Uh-oh. No! That's not good. I think. I don't know if it's bad. Yes, that's a weird. But most jobs don't care too much about their stats. Just to finish on that one, Luna. I think there's one thing where it might really matter quite a lot. Is if you're a job that likes critical hit and you're replacing an item that has a lot of critical hit on it with an item that does not have any critical hit on it, that might reach a point where it's such a dramatic difference that the item levels might not be worth it. But usually it's fine. Again, because the main stats on the item will be so significant that it doesn't matter. And Luna says, materials also seem very weird. Yeah, I suppose so. But the important part is that stats are simply solved by either you have two items of the same item level, and then you choose the one with the better stats of the two, like with the preferred stat line. Or you have two items of different item levels, and then you just wear the one with more item level on it. It used to be the case. It used to be the case that sometimes you could use an item with a lower item level, and it would be better because of materia, specifically overmelding. And the reason why materia were so strong back then was back in Stormblood and sometime before Stormblood, I suppose. You had access to main stat materia, so materia with strength on it, for example. And, well, that is almost an even weirder story, because if you've ever checked the stat line, like the stat limitations... Uh-oh. the stat limitations on gear when you're using materia. I don't think it shows it anymore because it's redundant, but it used to show the main stat limitation, and it was always such that if, for instance, you had a chest piece with 200 strength on it, then the limit on the chest piece was 200. Like, for instance, this chest piece would have a limit of intelligence of 301, so you wouldn't be able to fit any more intelligence in it. And that was always the case with weapons and armor. But back in the day, these slots, like the entire jewelry section, didn't have any main stats on them. So usually, like 99% of the time, you would just shove main stat materia in them. So like this one would have had a intelligence materia, this one would have intelligence materia. All of these would just have been filled with intelligence materia instead of something more creative, you could say. And then they decided to remove main stat materia because, shockingly, it made it very uninteresting and also awkward because I remember when I played back in Stormblood, some of the players in my free company complained about the fact that they could never find, as tanks, it was difficult to find a raid team they could join because farm parties would often set the item level, or occasionally they would set the item level requirement to join to be equal to the highest item level you could get. You know, for farm parties and stuff. But tanks specifically had this weird thing where the best rings in that particular raid tier at the time, and I don't remember which one it was, but if you played the raid tier you might know, the best rings were to bring 2 crafted rings in place of, you know, a raid drop, and then you would just overmeld it. So just strength all the way through, just 5 materia with strength in it, and it was very expensive. But the key thing is that if you were going to wear those rings, your item level would be lower, and because you weren't going to be using the raid rings, you would tend to not have them, like, at all. So it's not like you could inflate your item level by wearing those while looking in Party Finder. But that caused some problem for some tanks, because that's how Party Finder is. People will put weirdly high item level restrictions on their parties to make sure everyone's strong. Oh, 2 players fell. 3 players fell. That's really funny. Oh, and the boss is pulled. But yeah, what I would want to say about that is not that the game was weird for having the best gear for a specific role be crafted equipment. That was just like a thing. People discovered that it was good. And that's just how it is sometimes. Now, I would say that is an excellent punishment for the players that are too focused on making sure everyone has the highest item level, that they would never find 2 tanks, because an actual good tank would have a lower item level than what they were requesting. I thought that was hilarious. And ow. Yeah. Oh. Are we supposed to do something about those orbs? I have to be honest, I have never been super sure on the mechanics in Weaving City of Mahak. And speaking of mechanics, we might die if something is coming up. Oh, whew, just the information. This is what did I just watch? I'm just sitting there like, oh, 3 people just died. Ow. Note to self, don't stand anywhere near the tank. Ow. Attack? What attacked me? Oh dear. Oh boy. Ozma is really an excellent example of a weird boss. Hello, Leandro. Thank you so much, and welcome to the stream. I hope you do. Oh, I'm going to get killed by this again, aren't I? Yep. Ow. Ow. And I'm dead. I died to the last tick of the dot. Thank you so much, Leandro. I hope you're doing well. I've never really been good at this fight because I get Weeping City of Mahak in Alliance Rage so rarely that every time I see Ozma, I'm like, oh yeah, that's a boss in this game. Hey, Woolly Ram, how are you doing? Have you considered not dying? Ah, yes. Now that is a good strategy. Just don't die, Lamau. Ziv analysis even before the raid is over. Ah, yes. You would do more damage if you didn't die as much. Really? How insightful. Yeah, you just die and then it just says get good. Oh, I was wondering why it looked so strange, but it's because the boss was at a slight angle, was it? Oh, the boss is getting turned by the tank as it's doing stuff. Oh man. I don't know if I like that. It's very thoughtful, but I don't think I like that. Leander says, I only got done skates twice during the whole tombstone event. Oh. I don't know. I don't think for some reason I wouldn't say I don't feel done skates is that bad either. I feel specifically Weeping City of Mahak has so many weird mechanics, and I get it so rarely. But there is a the jester guy in Dunskate, isn't there? Where you can get wiped because people touched the mechanic and didn't understand the mechanic. Or the first boss in Dunskate, where often people die to fall damage or getting killed by the second suck on the pull-in mechanic. For me, completely misunderstanding those plants and forgetting which ones are the donut AoEs, I'm pretty impressed that I only got hit by one of them. Skill issue.jpg. Look, I'm still alive. Somehow. I might be dead now. Okay, I'm still not dead somehow. Four wounds. 'Tis a flesh wound. Don't worry about it. I'm fine. Laser! I'm the Vuln Master. Gotta catch them all, you see. Oh. Oh boy. I managed to be let out in the very last moment before the boss dies. Laughing smug anime girl. JPEG. Limit testing. Leander says, it's usually the first boss that's troublesome. Other than that, it's fine. To be frank, I get Mahak way less. Yeah. Exactly. Oh look, a minion I don't have. And a card I don't have. It's the first boss on Dunskate that is terribly evil because it has a mechanic that is like a suck-in. Like it drags you in and you have to stay out of the area. But the thing is that it doesn't really have a telegraph at all. So it'll just appear, suck you into it, and then you move out of it. You just move just barely out enough that you're out of the circle. And then it sucks you in again and then detonates and then you die. But it has no indicator that it's going to suck you in twice. It has no indicator. So it's like a knowledge check, which is really evil Like, that's a really evil kind of mechanic, because you have no chance of knowing that the first time. No chance. So half the raid might die to the first time the boss does that. Then you wipe, maybe, and then you go again, and then you don't make the mistake again. It's just a bad telegraph. And that, well, it doesn't ruin the fight, but it's really evil. And Willie Ram says, may have had too much Discord lately. Oh, that's fine. You say anyway, still Moogle tome farming? No, we're actually doing just daily content, weekly content, and then we randomly land in the content that gives Moogle tomestones. I haven't intentionally farmed a single tomestone since last week. Somehow I have 15. I had 1 when I finished last week. So I have gotten 14 from somewhere. I have gotten out of content, like done my roulettes, and then been like, why do I have this many tomestones? And then had to like retrace my steps. Like, oh, right. I landed in Kugane Ohashi. Ah, that does give 2 mark tomes, doesn't it? Things like that. All the buffs and the debuffs. Speaking of doing the roulettes, we're still missing the normal raid. Are you ready for normal raid, Sip? Robert says, what's the setting that has your spell cooldown timer in the middle of the icon? This one. So you go to character configuration, hotbar settings, and then you set it to centered. I have a video on the subject of all of the helpful UI settings you might be interested in under character config. And I just go through it in order. And that one is from after the most recent time they added stuff, but I suppose we might have to go into settings to adjust being able to see whether attacks are magic or physical in future. Although I think they said they would default it to show. Can you find it, Robert, or are you taking notes for later? And Woolly Ram says, any more items you want from the first boss? Nope, I got all of the items that I needed last week. So I don't know, maybe if I get enough of them, I'll buy some maps or something, I guess. Yeah, Robert, I understand that. This kind of feature is something that people have wanted for years. The interesting thing is that in World of Warcraft, people have used add-ons to add like a centered counter in the center of cooldowns since forever ago. Like, that's always what you do. You just get an add-on to be able to do that. Because it's so bad when you don't have it. Robert says, taking notes for later. Still will be a few hours before I can log in. Well, in that case, let me just find the video that I mentioned. And that should include that too. And Will Ram says, putting an emote next to your cast bar is real helpful, especially when you have unavoidably high ping. Huh? Why? Oh, I get it. The emote lights up when you can slide cast. And when your animation lock. Huh. Right? Oh, it's specifically when you can slide cast. What a discovery. Wow. Let me just grab an emote to do that again. You can just see exactly when you can slide cast by having an emote. Wow, I've never known that. What a weird detail. Oh yes, the slow-mo rockets. Oh dear. And Will Ram says, slide casting is good in general and it's essential with 140 ms. That's a really good tip. The reason why it's surprising me to discover this kind of trick now is that it's like only a few weeks ago that I made like a starter guide short on how to slide cast. Now if only I had known this little extra tip earlier, I would have included it. We took a lot of unnecessary damage there because one of the tanks decided to step out of the circle right in the last moment. The way that I normally know how to, like, when you can slide cast is just that I keep track of a specific number, but if your latency is really bad, as Wooly Ram said, then that point of reference doesn't help. Like, if your connection is really good, you can slide cast when this number is less than half a second. But if your latency is terrible, then you can slide cast, well, whenever this emote says so. That's funny. The one that was under the boss was the one we almost... Well, the one we actually missed. Incredible. Robert says, do enemies get a slide cast window? Technically, I guess they would, but I don't think enemies care. Like, they wouldn't use it. Even if they had one. Actually, that leads to a completely different, interesting point about enemies in Final Fantasy XIV. If you're tanking, and like for instance, you're tanking a large pack of mobs, and your healer's clearly not going to be able to keep you alive. Like, you're going to die One way you can survive a little longer is actually by running away, and that's not something I'm making up. Running away does work. It will work. And the tank isn't doing it. They're stepping into it and then assuming. Okay, they did it in the end, but they're stepping into it assuming that it'll just be activated. But the reason why it works is because enemies will run up in range of you to attack. And then they will attack. And then there is a downtime before they can attack again, you know, their auto attack. They will not bother to check whether they can attack you. Like, they will move to get in range to attack again when their auto attack is ready. That was really funny. Oh, now we have to get a skedaddle before someone gives us loot. Let me actually, I can show you this. Let's just doesn't really matter where we go. And just go to a high level zone that isn't too story relevant or too spoilery to see anyway. Might not be so easy with a big enemy to really see it. But I will showcase it. You could almost say that enemies have the inverse of a slide cast window. All enemies have disappeared from the universe, apparently. There it is. So, I smack this Hamza, so it's attacking me, right? So it attacks me there. Now it's downtime. You can see I can literally avoid nearly all damage from it. As long as I'm running in a straight line, I can keep ahead of it and it will not be able to attack me. If I start turning, then it'll eventually be close enough that it will be able to hit me because of server shenanigans. But for the most part, this works in dungeons. The reason you don't do it is because, surprisingly, running away from enemies makes it really difficult for your party to attack. But this works. You can do this, like one particular dungeon where I have had to do this multiple times is the last pull in the level 81 dungeon, like the last trash pull. And the reason for that is because it's like a weird 3-pack pull. Like it's a 1-pack, 1 enemy, and then another pack. And some of the mobs in those packs are just brutal. Like they have mini tank busters and stuff. And if you're not, like, if you're level 81, you don't have your better tank cooldown. If you're level 82, you have it. But even if you do, your healer still has to keep you alive in between the uses of your new fancy cooldown. It's so hard that I had to kite even as a warrior. Even as a warrior, I had to do that for just a few seconds. Because, keep in mind, in most cases, I believe the mobs in dungeons are a little bit faster, just slightly faster than out in the open. So they will catch up to you faster and smack you more. But you running away from the enemies like that can make them swing like 1 second slower. You basically add a second to their swing timer by running away. And sometimes that 1 second is going to make the difference between you surviving or dying. I do mention this in my tank basics guide. It's a little old, it's back from Shadowbringers, but it's entirely relevant to this day. I also showcased this in that guide in a different zone, but it's very, very easy to demonstrate. It looks kind of funny, doesn't it? Mooney Ram says, Final Fantasy XIV spaghetti code must be legendary in programming or game dev circles. I wonder. I wonder. It is funny to think about that there is a lot of mechanics in Final Fantasy XIV that are spaghetti code, like weirdness because of weird programming decisions ages ago, and instead of trying to fix them, they've made it a mechanic, such as slide casting. Slide casting is, as far as I understand, an effect of how communication between the client and the server works. And while it looks really, really normal or just a little laggy from the player's perspective, have you ever watched someone else slidecast? Have you ever watched another player slidecast? Because it looks really weird. Like, the way it looks is, it looks closer to how, if you do fights like with a slippery floor, and then you press a button and then you slide like 5 feet or 10 feet forward or whatever. It looks more like that than anything else, except that you're just doing the running animation while sliding. It looks super strange. But it could be worse. It could be worse. Apparently back in the day, the way weaving worked, the limitations of weaving was more related to like the server lagging rather than like built-in limitations like animation locks and stuff. I read a Dragoon guide from A Realm Reborn on New Year's Eve, because a friend of mine showed it to me. And the guide mentioned that to weave anything, like to actually weave anything at all, you just had to mash the button like your life depended on it, because spell queuing didn't work for abilities, it appears. If you're wondering what spell queuing is, that's what makes it so that when you click a weapon skill, you can click it a little bit in advance and it will still work. Like if I run up to this striking dummy, I click 1 and then I click 2 now. And then I click 3 and I can click it like almost a quarter of its cooldown out and it'll still do it. This is also the reason why macros feel really unresponsive, because they have no spell queuing. The only quote-unquote spell queuing you have is if you add a like the same action call like 13 times, then it will call it on each of these frames, so up to 13 frames. I have a macro guide too that explains this in more detail, but a normal action will try to cast the action that you're trying to use for like a fourth of the GCD or more, which is significantly more than more than half a second. Macros built optimally to make the most of it can maybe spell queue for less than a quarter of a second. So apparently back in A Realm Reborn there was no spell queuing for abilities, so you just had to mash it. And eventually the server would get around to it. And because there was a lot more server lag, both because the servers were all in Canada, apparently, it was pretty normal that late weaving was the only kind of weaving. You couldn't weave anything really until like 1.5 seconds after the GCD. And that probably also explains why back in A Realm Reborn you used burst macros. And what I mean by that is, if you have played World of Warcraft, it is not unusual to see a macro that will cast your biggest damage cooldown and use items that boost your damage as well, all at once with a single button press, and that's like a burst macro. You used that in A Realm Reborn and just mashed it until all of your cooldowns had been used. I'm guessing because there was no feasible way you could weave it in a fluid way. It was just better to just mash it and let the GCDs you lose on it be lost. So speaking of Final Fantasy XIV spaghetti code, I feel like they managed to work it out pretty well. It was worse. So every week I usually do the final fight of the current raid tier. Because it drops, in addition to dropping tokens to buy gear, it also drops a specific token to buy weapons, and that's the only way to get a 620 weapon right now outside of Savage raiding, so it's a good idea to have those. And Woolly Ram says there is a non-TOS approved method to circumvent lag so that you can always double weave. Yeah, that's true. There are some tricks, there are some things to use. Always remember that you use third-party tools at your own risk. Yeah, so we're going to be doing the final boss of the current raid tier. Overall, I would say that it isn't really, like, if you haven't played any Endwalker, then it is not really anything that you can glean any story spoilers from. And because it's a raid, it's usually not relevant to the main story anyway. And Woolly Ram says, WoW is also suffering from spaghetti code. Its netcode is being severely strained by the mass of logging and auction house add-ons. That's true. I feel like I remember some months ago I read about them making limitations to how much add-ons could request. So that if you had too many add-ons requesting stuff, the server would start to just decline. Like, just not let you ask for more to compensate for this. I'm more impressed they haven't done it sooner. That is interesting. We are a tank and a healer, and we're queuing for the normal raid fight on the weekly reset. It's quite impressive that we haven't found any group yet. Oh well. But part of the reasoning for why add-ons and things like that aren't really accepted by Final Fantasy XIV is both because it puts some sort of expectation from the development team on trying to accommodate it, and also it causes some really awkward situations because the console players can't use add-ons. With World of Warcraft, that's not an issue because all clients can technically use add-ons. It's not the case with Final Fantasy XIV. So if it was legal to use third-party tools in Final Fantasy XIV, then all of the console players would immediately be alienated. They wouldn't be able to compete. And Wooly Ram says, and add-on writers have compensated for the compensation by having their add-ons make even more queries per second to prevent any other query from getting to the front of the line. Oh boy. I actually thought, because I didn't hear much more about it after that, I actually thought that it would have led to add-on writers trying to get a little bit more efficient with their queries. But I suppose the more likely scenario and and the alternative would be that they would just do whatever it takes to make their add-on function correctly, right?
Out of my sight. Leave naught but ash in your wake.
Leave naught but ash in your wake.
And seep sorrow into your heart. A fitting death. Behold the fruits of sacrifice.
The most silly wipe I've ever had on this fight was when the boss had like 10% health left. All of the DPS ignored these adds and just hoped someone else would deal with them. One of those Gorgonian attacks going through can cause a wipe immediately. So it's better to just cancel whatever you're doing and fix that, is what I've learned. Regardless of what role you are.
Perish in flames embers. Go forth and sate your boundless hunger. From fulgent flame my servants rise. Out of my sight. I shall see my wish fulfilled.
You know, I think that's a good suggestion, Wooly Ram, to make it so that you can't just use DPS meters for everything. But I do feel like DPS meters aren't really a huge issue because they supposedly read the log, which the game is going to hand to you anyway. So that one shouldn't cause too much of damage to the servers, so to speak. Like, you're getting that log anyway. The damage meter should be reading that log. So if they're getting their damage numbers in a different way, then that should maybe be put a damper on somehow. Auction house crawlers and stuff like that is probably a good idea to disable. I think they should, like, we can probably agree that the cause of these auction house crawlers and stuff like that is that World of Warcraft's own auction house, like as it is, has been woefully outdated for over a decade. So add-ons are used to compensate, which is done in a very awkward way. Because you just have to, you know, make the existing auction house work for you and give you the information you need to be able to represent the auction house in a nicer way. But they reworked how the auction house looks a few months ago, I believe. So if they made the auction house, the actual auction house as it is, more efficient, surely you wouldn't need all these auction house add-ons that crawl the entire place anymore. Right? Hopefully not. So we could probably agree on that one, that there's no need for, for these crawlers when they have made the auction house itself better. Hey Byron, thank you so much. I hope you're doing well. So if you have not done the most recent raid before, keep in mind that you can only win one item of this list, except the minion. That one is separate. But all of these gear tokens, you can only win one. The only reason why I'm rolling on everything and I'm greeting on everything is because I don't really care which item I get. I just want one. I just want a thing. So I haven't gone for nothing. But I don't really care which one I get, so I'll let everyone else that has a particular preference have theirs first. Because I've done this so many times that I actually have a lot of tokens already. For most pieces, as you can see. Hello. Is that Javane? Javane Hamilton? Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I hope you're doing well. And Woolly Ram says, the battle log for World of Warcraft pushes its info to every client within range of the fight, because damage meters exist. I know that if you have a specific third-party tool active while in an open world area in Final Fantasy XIV, if enough players do attacks in the zone, like for instance a hunt train, it can freeze your computer. It can freeze your computer. So I would argue that the battle log works similarly in Final Fantasy XIV, not to respect a DPS meter necessarily. But the battle log is the battle log. It gives you a summary of what happened so that you can see what happened to you. Most players don't care about it in any open world area. So I can see the argument for why you wouldn't need it. And Wally Ram says, any good glams in the raid? Well, let's check the glam. The issue for me, the reason why I don't care that much about the raid glam, is because you need the savage version to be able to dye it, and as you know, I have a particular preference for what color my equipment is. So you need the savage version to dye it. But that doesn't mean we can't take a look at it. Here we have the tank outfit. And yes, that ring of fire is part of the outfit. It is attached to the chest piece. So if you can find a set of different gear that matches with the chest, you can have the ring of fire on you separately. And that's the tank one. And then let's see the striker one for samurai and monk. They just have fire coming out of their shoulders. And an oven where their head is supposed to be. It looks like. I guess don't look too closely. That makes no sense. Can you make the window big? Yes. Apparently I can. Nuna says, that's gotta be the worst helmet ever. What? You don't want an oven in your face? Let's see the maiming one. They also get the ring. There's actually a pretty nice outfit for tombstones for dragoons and reapers. And we can check that after. Obviously, monk and samurai and dragoon and reaper are the same, so let's not check that again. And we continue down the list. Ninja, what does yours look like? That looks a little bit like a mage outfit, doesn't it? Actually, it looks like a summoner outfit because it has the horn. It does look kind of nice. Let's see the aiming. And Woolly Ram says, with current temperatures, I would happily take a portable oven hat. Ah, yes. That is a good point. And apparently the aiming one is an orange variant of the same outfit. So we get to the mages. And those are the ones without a closed helmet. It's just a mask. And burning shoulders. Like these burning shoulders gives me like shaman vibes from World of Warcraft for some reason. Shaman and mage vibes. And then, of course, the caster mage DPS is the purple variant. And just to take an example, let's see how how we can dye such an outfit. That's not that pink. I mean, I'll take it, but it's not the strongest I've seen. Right, the outfit I was talking about before, the Dragoon one. I'm pretty sure it's not just Dragoon, it might also be tank. Can't remember if it's the current set or the previous set. It's not this set. So first of all, you have a visor you can toggle. It has a very classic Dragoon vibe, but the thing that I really like about this outfit is that if you are a race with a tail, it comes with tail armor. It comes with tail armor. I don't know if it also comes with tail armor if you're not a race with a tail, and if it does, then that's going to look a little awkward, but I think it's really cool. I think there's only like a small handful of chest pieces in the game that has tail armor. I believe one of them was the level 80 Dragoon job gear. I think that one had it. I don't think... I don't remember what else had it, but it's like, it's really, really rare. I think maybe this one has it too? Yeah, the tank one also has the tail armor. Sip says, I wish I had tail armor. You don't even have a tail, Sip. Maybe you could use some ear armor. So just in case anyone is looking at this, if anyone's looking at this kind of armor and going, I wish I could have that, and namely the dyeable version, then what you need to do is, first of all, it's going to be very expensive because, you know, 825 tomestones of astronomy, that's actually a lot of money. I cover this in my recent video on tomestones of astronomy, just for a single piece of glamour. I mean, relative to how expensive glamour items can be at times, it's not that bad, but you could have bought actual gear with that money, right? Gear that gives you upgrades. But you have to buy this. Then you need to do this alliance raid, the most recent alliance raid. Then you will get one of these coins. And then you go over to this guy and say, this out of this world thing. I'm not gonna click on it because there might be spoilers, and there were probably spoilers on the screen just now, but because now I have mentioned it after it's gone, you didn't notice, hopefully. But then you can buy, for the coins, you can buy one of these Radiant Twine, and then you can upgrade it so you can dye it. And then you would be able to make an outfit look like something like this. This is totally not made to go with this outfit, but yeah, I could totally do this. I just prefer my shirts on my Dragoon Reaper outfit to be a little bit longer. So apparently, Sip just sent me a picture of him trying the outfit with the tail. And well, probably easiest to just show you, right? It comes with the tail armor. It's just not attached to anything, so it's just kind of hanging there. That's pretty funny. Anyway, if you are starting to like collect gear at max level, I would highly advise you don't spend all of your tomestones on some glamour. And Woolly Ram says, a bit too dark, hard to see details on the set. I suppose so. And it would also be really hard to see the little tail on a Lalafell anyway. Zip says, if only there was a way to get pink dye on it. But Zip, there is a way to get pink dye on it. The upgraded version can be dyed. It can, that's what I was just saying. But yeah, I would not recommend buying this Radiant equipment if you're still trying to collect like a full set of item level 610 gear, for example. Your money would be better spent there, and you could earn money with the tomestones, as I mentioned in that recent video. And Woolly Ram says, speaking of tails, wouldn't you expect Mikota and Order tailoring and furniture making to always assume a tail and ears and horns? That is a good point. That is a really good point. I guess the best explanation there is that if you put on a like some of the low-level helmets, if a Mikote puts it on, it usually gets like small like cat ear shaped stuff on the top to like fit your ears as well. But for Aura, I believe it's usually just that your horns just like fit through the helmet somehow, and But I suppose the tail should be considered a lot. My best guess is that they typically just consider it in making a hole for the tail because they wouldn't want to like restrict your tail. The purpose of a tail on animals is to help with balance, of course, and if your tail is held in place by armor plating, then you wouldn't be able to use it for balance. And if you have a long tail, then I suppose the reason you have a long tail is because you want that very, very efficient balance. So I guess that's also why this Radiant armor set has like a plating over the tail that like can sort of follow it, but not more than that, because if it was any more than that, then it would be too restrictive. And speaking of which, Woolly Ram, the Radiant armor set, like so these armor sets, the guard of this Ratsathan city is called the Radiant Host. So basically this is armor worn by the guard of the city, I guess. And the city appears to be a lot of auras, right? Among other things. So I guess that in this case we can say this is a society where they all have tails, so of course they would make tails for their guard. So I guess you're right, Woolly Ram. I'm guessing the reason why a lot of outfits just don't have it is because the probability an outfit has been designed by not an aura or a Mikote is possibly higher than the chance that it is. I don't know. But logically, you're right. They would consider ears, tails, horns, because they have them. Anyway, we finished the dailies. I even finished a weekly clear of the most recent raid. So I think I covered the things that I intended to cover tonight. And it's also around the time where we normally round up the stream. So if there's anything you guys would like to talk about, then I would love to hear the questions in the chat before we finish the stream. And Sip just realized that he could in fact get this Radiant outfit if he wanted to, but he needs a lot of Tomestones of Astronomy that he has spent on relics. So he's even further behind on his grinds. So that is a pretty good example. Was it Potato Rice that asked earlier? What to do and work towards at max level. Glamour is apparently the answer. Farm the most recent tomestones to buy tomestone equipment, apparently, to get the glamour. Well, it looks like there aren't really any particular questions, but I guess we've also been answering questions on the go here in the last while. If that makes sense. Well, in that case, let me talk about a few other things instead. In the pinned message in the live chat, there is a link to the Discord community server for the YouTube channel. So if you would like to be able to talk with the people that you know and love from the live streams, they might be more easily found there. Also, on this Discord, I put the weekly schedule in an easily trackable channel, so you can find what is happening in the next week at all times very easily without having to track it down somewhere on YouTube due to algorithms. I also post every time there's a new video or a new stream, letting you know a little bit in advance, as best I can. And yeah, it's a good place if you don't want to leave whether you see what's coming on the channel up to the whims of the YouTube algorithm and would rather be able to follow it directly on Discord. William says, imagine aura beds designed for side sleeping and preventing the horns from damaging the pillow mattress. You just put on like weird marshmallowy things on the tips of your horns so that you don't stab anything while you're sleeping. Like foam on your horns. So you don't break anything while you're sleeping. They'd sleep on chainmail sheets. Oh yeah, the scales on their skin might also break something or tear something. Ah. That's pretty good. Another thing that I would like to mention before we round off is that there is a membership option on the channel. I want to be clear that the membership option does not really include, it does not include like exclusive streams or videos or anything like that. It is presented as an option if you would like to support the channel beyond watching stuff, and it is entirely optional. But I would like to mention that what it comes with anyway. The membership means that if you're on the stream, your name is highlighted in like a green color instead of the gray default. And you also get like a fancy icon next to it that I drew myself. You get access to the few emotes that I have been allowed to make. To use, I don't know if you can use them everywhere or on just my channel stuff, but you do get access to them for streams at the very least, and for comments. And your name will be put in the end slate of my future videos, as you are a member. If that is something you are interested in, and if you are on the Discord channel, you also get a fancy color for your name. For the most part, it's just something to say thank you for choosing to support the channel extra with your own money, which was entirely optional. I mostly want to highlight this because sometimes people choose to super chat, and I would rather people buy a membership than buy a super chat, because the super chat gives lets you send me a message now, but the membership gives you something in return. And for me to intercept and make sure you get the membership rather than the super chat, I have to say it first, basically. So that's why I'm taking the time to explain it. In future, you will also be able to see special polls when I'm asking about stuff for the channel in future. But as long as there's not that many people that are members, it would be a little awkward to make a vote. So that is still something that is coming soon, TM. And Woolram says you'd need something to support the neck, especially for male aura, as they have massively broad shoulders. Huh? Who's this? Is this someone in the stream? Wait a minute. Wait a minute. That's someone on the Discord server. Alti. That's someone on the Discord server. Are they also on the stream, I wonder? Altia Luxor. You guessed correctly. Some is oh yeah, that makes sense. Altia. That's funny. You found your way onto where I am in game. And you are on the European data centers too. Javane says, that's probably me. What? And you're even on Louis Swan. That's true. You're not a wanderer or a traveler. Convenient. And Sip also announced that not only are you on Louis Swan, you're also a sailor like my best friend Arya. A blackhorn small dragon. Good night, Woolly Ram. See you very soon. That's okay, Ulti. I have said previously, and I've said it multiple times, that I don't mind that people seek me out in-game. It actually, I would like you guys to know that it happens so rarely that I was surprised when 2 people walked up to me in a single day. So it's not like it's a huge problem for me. I have said that it's totally okay. In fact, I said near the start of the stream that if you were on the EU data centers and you wanted to join for the daily Sib and I were doing, you were welcome to do so, but no one said they wanted to, and maybe they weren't aware that it was an option because they missed me saying it, but I wanted people to join in if they wanted to. But it's not very easy to say that repeatedly all the time. But it is really fun to see that there's a bunch of people on the EU data centers that have sought me out. So, Ninja. So that means that there's a bigger chance that we would be able to plan something that involves the community doing something together, while we still don't have worldwide data center travel. You missed the majority of the stream. Oh, I'm sorry about that. Maybe next time. Oh, you have a night works night schedule like Seb? Jawayne asks if I play on NA. I do not. My main is on Louis Swan on Chaos EU data center, and my my secondary character that I play on streams once a week, is on Light, which is also EU. So I'm only accessible on EU. Hopefully we'll have worldwide data center travel sooner rather than later. And Ulti says, different shift every week. Ah. Well, anyway, as Ulti said, I missed the majority of the stream. In fact, I was about to close out the stream. It's always the worst when there's someone coming in right at the end, and I feel extra bad because they just barely managed to not be very much part of it. I feel bad. But I'm still glad that you tuned in. So just as a little summary of what's coming up next on the channel, on Friday we have a video premiere as usual, and that is going to be a video outlining some tips for ranged DPS jobs, specifically ranged physical jobs. There's a separate one coming for mages. Because while it's similar tips, it's not always the same answer. So it does make sense. And on Saturday, we're continuing the story of Small Kai. And we might, I say might, we might be able to complete the Stormblood story. But no promises. Also, Ultia, what is your favorite role between mage, healer, and ranged physical? So basically not melee. What is your favorite not melee job? Is a dancer. Dancer. Looks nice. It actually works surprisingly well with that blue color, I feel. Sib actually bought his himself. Anyway, just as just explaining here is that when people choose to approach me in game, I like to give a robe matching mine as a little souvenir. One thing you'll notice about said robe is that it has my name on it because I crafted it so that it has my name on it, and it will match my robe myself. And I want to give one that you would actually like to use, or could use at least. Like some players would not be able to use a mage one if they have no mages leveled, so that's why I ask who your favorite job is, or what your favorite job is amongst those that have the robe. And you don't have to use it. You can just keep it if you would like. You could also not keep it. But I just want to give it out so that to encourage that people are allowed to come up and talk with me. And Zip claims that I stole the rope from him, forgetting that I've used this rope in this color since Shadowbringers. I thought it looked nice. I'm not the biggest fashionista in the world, so if you prefer doing something else, that's okay. Right. Anyway, I think that is everything it's going to be. Now that we've spent a good 40 minutes or so on looking at outfits and talking about everything and nothing in particular, I think that is a great time to say that that was a nice stream. I hope everyone had a nice New Year party or celebration or whatever they did. Maybe they preferred to just game on their own all night. And aside from that, as I say, good night, or good morning, or afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. Thank you so much for watching along. And I'll say good night from here. Good night. See you all very soon. Hopefully Friday or Saturday. Good night.